Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, we're going to be talking about how we booked 154 sales calls for 3 clients from 3 webinars by deliberately not selling. And just to confirm, before you think I've gone mad, right? That is completely right. That is without selling to the audience. We deliberately did not sell to the audience. And although that might sound counterintuitive at this point in the video, right? Because as you know, right, the whole point of doing webinars is to make sales. But as you can see from those headlines, what we're doing here by deliberately not selling, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about in this video, is working pretty damn well, right? So if you don't know who I am, my name's Charlie McCormack, founder at Webinar Wizards. I've done over £1 million generated for info products like networking groups, supplier access, coaching, consultant businesses, that kind of realm, right? Started off as a direct response copywriter. I learned funnels and automations, pretty much the standard path of any copywriter. Niche down, went all in on webinars, realized that the old way of doing webinars does not work for the majority of offers in the current state of the market. And the majority of that £1 million in cash collected is from one-to-many call funnels, as we're calling them, in the past 12 months since we went all in on webinars. And if you want proof, you can just go to the link in the description, webinarwizards.com. Bunch of fucking videos on there and whatever else, right? P.S. You know as well as I do that the only thing that matters is cash, not calls, okay? So I'm going to make another video breaking down the total cash collected that we actually made from all the calls that we booked here. I'm going to send it to my newsletter probably, but just so you know, so far from those calls, we've done about 84k GBP, which at the time of recording this is 111k USD, and we've got a fuck ton of calls still to go. So we did this by doing something that I've actually been doing for a while, but I've been doing it unconsciously, right? But I didn't realize I was actually doing it until I kind of brought it into the conscious realm, realized I was doing it, decided to go all in on doing it and try it and test it out, okay? Side note, if you don't want to watch this video, you just want us to do what we're doing here done for you, click the link below, watch the VSL, but if not, if you stay to the end of this video, I'm going to show you how you can start implementing this non-salesy webinar principle in your own or your client's webinar. So, how the fuck does this work? Okay, let's talk business. Because let's face it, right? Webinars get a bad rep in the space, right? We all know why. Webinars get a bad rep in the info space because everyone associates webinars with the kind of 997 pitch fests of the kind of ClickFunnels era, right? I just thought ClickFunnels era, I thought Ty Lopez, right? Shout out Ty and his Lambo, right? And I keep seeing the same thing over and over again from people on Twitter, from people on Instagram, from people on YouTube, people in their VSLs being like basically making out that webinars are this like bait and switch, scammy way to sell info products, right? And honestly, I know that the hard thing is about this is that I actually kind of get it, right? Because I have sat through webinars where like from the whole thing basically just feels like a trap. Okay, from the moment you fucking get on, the energy's weird, and as a result, people actually get put off doing webinars because they don't want to be put in this bucket of people who do webinars. So as a result, they don't do them, regardless of the fact that it would make them a fuck ton of money, right? Or worse. Here's the real kicker, right? I sound like fucking ChatGPT when I say that. Here's the real kicker. But they'll choose to do webinars, but they do it wrong because they aren't authentic, right? And because they feel bad about selling and they feel like webinars are this like scammy thing where they're selling their course or whatever, they present with this weird like apologetic type energy, right? Almost like you're apologizing for something that's already about to happen. Like you've kind of set the audience up in a trap, right? So when offer owners have this perception of webinars as this like scammy, right? They rush through the content because they're like, oh, I need to get to the pitch or else I'm not going to make dough, whatever. They downplay the offer because they feel bad about selling it. And then they kind of like whisper the price and don't really give like the bonuses and stuff, the real due diligence that they need because they don't want to be salesy. But then you strike out on a double whammy because you pulled your punches and you don't make any fucking money of it, right? And this isn't because webinars don't work, right? This is because people are doing webinars the old way, not the way that they need to be done these days, right? So we all know it's one of those things people put it on ads, right? People put it in their YouTube videos and they're like, oh, the market is way more skeptical right now, right? But it is genuinely fucking true, okay? If you are in the industry, you are selling it off, you know that this is true, okay? So if you try and put on this act of being like a pushy, manipulative salesman who's just trying to sling on a webinar, right? You are doing it for the sake of cash, right? People can smell this. And I know this because with our consulting clients, right? A lot of our consulting clients are growth operators, they're sales managers, and they are coming to us for consulting because they want to do webinars for their clients. But a lot of the time they'll actually say to us, I'm finding it really hard to actually get the offer owner to like properly present and pitch on the webinar. And this is because they're coming from a place of trying to sell rather than trying to serve. So all we need to do is reframe them and remind them that everybody's going to leave the call better than when they came, okay? Regardless of whether they choose to work with you or not, okay? So because we like to do things differently around here, right? And because we are actively doing webinars, it's the only funnel that we offer, right? Pretty much. And we have constructed a new way that we are kind of testing that doesn't really feel salesy, right? It's a new way to write webinar scripts, to actually present on a webinar, and ultimately to sell on a webinar that, like I said, does not really feel salesy at all, okay? And it's a way that, the approach that we're taking here is that we're trying to make sure that the audience feels so deeply understood that when you finally present your offer, it doesn't even feel like a pitch, right? It feels like you're coming from a place of like service, okay? So we're trying to make our webinars feel more like therapy sessions instead of sales calls. And that is what I want to unpack with you today, okay? And it starts with this psychological principle. Some of you might have heard of Carl Rogers, some of you might not have, but it's called unconditional positive regard, okay? Funnily enough, when I was actually bringing this into the conscious light and actively trying to do this more with clients, right, I realized that I had actually learned about this principle when I was doing A-level psychology when I was like 17, 18, right? But I didn't remember until I was actually doing this video. So we do webinars to make money. But the problem is that in order to make money, you have to sell something because money does not come from the sky. We all fucking know this, right? And a lot of people have this negative connotation, right? Even established business owners, like we work with clients who are doing like 100K a month, who have this like weird, like I said earlier, this apologetic energy when it comes to selling, right? When you're selling on a sales call one-to-one, no one sees the recording, okay? You can kind of hide behind the G Meets or the Zoom call, and nobody will know the pressure that you put on the prospect to get them to buy, right? We've all heard stories of and seen the videos of the close on Instagram doing some fucking mad shit to get someone to actually close because no one's actually going to see you do it. But the thing is, on a webinar, because you're putting yourself out there and because everyone in the public can see it, you kind of need to be a bit more careful with things, right? So if we're going to do webinars in the current market conditions, which everyone agrees, everyone is more skeptical, right? We need to do them correctly. And the reason that most webinars feel like they're coming from this horrible place is because they're attacking the prospects too much and they're selling from a place of judgment and they attack the beliefs of the prospects too much, right? On a sales call, you can do this one-to-one because you can kind of get that real-time feedback loop of the other person's body language. But obviously on a webinar, unless you actually have like people in a Zoom call, we can't do that, right? Which means we have to change our approach without taking it a step too far. So most webinars are just like, oh, you're doing it wrong. You don't have the right strategy. You don't know what you're doing. You're stuck. You're being a loser. And guess what? I can fix all your problems if you pay me money, right? But underneath the kind of underlying kind of superstructure in most people's webinars, that we're basically just like beating the prospects down and telling them that they are broken and that they aren't good enough, right? And the hard thing is that this is kind of true, right? And we still need the prospects on the webinar to arrive at the outcome that, they need our offer or else they won't buy and we won't make any money. But this is the funny thing to me, right? And I actually saw this in a Jason Fladlian video, who's like the goat of webinars, right? And he was like, why do people not buy things? That they would be better off if they had it. They know your offer could help them. They believe your case studies. They believe that you're the person to help them. They know that their life and the life of people around them would be better if they had it, but they still don't buy, right? Why is this the case? And a lot of the time it's because most webinars are designed and they attack the prospects too much in the copy where the prospects feel inadequate, right? We're just like kicking them down and then being like, we're pushing them to the edge of the cliff and then saying like, oh, I'll help you back up. Rather than like with this new approach, what I'm really trying to do is get people to a place where they actually feel like they deserve to work with us and they deserve to claim the offer, right? So we want them to feel ready to take action, right? We don't want to belittle them to the point where they feel so small and shy that they actually feel worse about their life than when they came. We want them to feel adequate already, right? We want our prospects to watch our webinar. When we've pitched, we want them to feel, big and confident and broad and confident enough in themselves that they are willing to bet on their future and actually make an investment into themselves, right? We want them to feel like they deserve this. Like they should be doing this out of a place of abundance because they deserve it and this is going to give them the life that they want, rather than a place of lack or scarcity or fear or urgency, right? And I really tried to dial down this approach after reading, some of you might have read it, but Nero Knowledge's book, Outsmarting Reality, right? So if any of you have ever done the whole visualization thing, you will know that you are kind of filled with this emotion that comes with making your goals a reality, okay? You feel, when you imagine yourself in whatever your dream state is, you feel like you're ready to run through a brick wall, right? You feel like fucking Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 3 when he's fucking skanking, he's dancing through the streets of New York. You feel like Bradley Cooper when he's on NZT, right? You feel great. So I thought, if this is true, which it is for most people, which is why like Tony Robbins and all these big guys, right? It's why they make all their money, because this stuff actually works. Would it not be beneficial for us to write the copy in a way that gets prospects into their desired state so they take the action that they would take to get them into their desired state, right? And this was the kind of food for thought that I really built this off, right? And when we compare that to what most people are doing on webinars, where they're creating too much pain and they're agitating too much, right? We're reaffirming the fact that they are struggling and the fact that they are in a bad situation. And we're kind of taking the wind out of their sails and then expecting them to either book a call or buy something there, right? Would it not be better for someone to be gassed, right? To be excited and want to book a call as soon as possible, rather than having someone book in this state of like fear and anger or frustration. This is kind of what I'm building this off, right? And I don't want you to get it twisted and think that we aren't putting any pain in there at all. We are, right? We're showing them we understand, but we're not spending 60 minutes like grilling people and then swooping in with our offer like a hero, right? Okay. Take that snus out. Bosh, right? Because in some cases, the direct-to-car, like our super pain-based webinars work. It converts some people, but it makes a lot of people just feel like shit, right? Including the offer owners the majority of the time. Like, this is why I put this together, because a lot of offer owners don't actually like selling on a webinar, right? Because deep down, they know they're not actually there to help. They're just manufacturing discomfort to make people compelled to buy, okay? So with this new approach, we're trying to cook up a way where we can sell just as effectively, more effectively, without anyone feeling judged or broken or inadequate, and in a way that you can kind of like position yourself as an expert, which is what you are, right? And present your offer in a way that's more of an invitation rather than like a rescue mission, right? So Carl Rogers was a psychologist who like did a lot of stuff to do with therapy, right? And focused on change, because this is what we're doing on a webinar. We're trying to get people to change, okay? So unconditional positive regard is accepting and supporting another person without judgment or conditions, okay? And I'll explain to you what this means. It doesn't mean that we're approving of everything they do and we're not pretending that they're perfect, okay? It means that we're kind of like separating the person from their current situation or their mistakes. And obviously in therapy, this is where people actually like work through and create change, which is again, what we're trying to do on a webinar. So I asked myself, how could we bring this energy to a webinar, right? What if instead of spending 60 minutes pointing out everything the audience is doing wrong and why they're suffering, we spent 60 minutes helping them understand why they are where they are, validating the experiences that they're having at the moment and showing them that they're not broken, but that they're just missing a piece of the puzzle, right? So I watched Brian Moncada's webinar that he did the other week when he launched his Ad Spend AI. And he like embodied this perfectly, right? He was leaning heavily into like, you want to run an agency or a coaching business that is peaceful, right? Something that you're passionate about and something that focuses on profit, right? And he had a phenomenal webinar and the results from it were phenomenal if what he's saying in his emails are telling the truth, right? And he did all of that without kind of doing the whole scarcity thing, without doing the whole urgency thing and the fear, right? Because these were the emotions that he wanted to invoke in order to sell, right? He wanted people to think like, yeah, I really want to run a business from that place, right? Same with, if any of you get this guy's ads, right? Neil's, his perspective webinars, he leans into this massively as well, where it's like, oh, you want to have more time as an agency owner. You want to be able to launch clients faster so you can scale, right? He's not talking about the problems. He's talking about the desired state, okay? Same with Matt Gray, right? He has massively similar angles to Brian Moncada, where he's talking about, building a quiet business and building something you're passionate about, right? And Matt does like 500K from his webinars every single month, once a month, right? And as you can see here, none of these angles that these people are using, right, who are all driving with webinar funnels tailor towards the traditional webinar model of like pitching on the call, right? What they're doing, what we are trying to do, is put the buying decision into the prospect's hands, but to empower the prospect, right? And when you do this, you win way more trust because you're not talking down to them. You're not making people feel stupid, right? They're way more receptive to what you have to say when someone actually likes you. Okay, no one's going to like you if you just fucking tell them everything that they're doing wrong. They're actually staying engaged because you've kind of opened this loop in their head where desired reality, right? I'm feeling this. I actually really want to know what this person's got to say because I want to be in this desired state, right? Because we've not gone so ham on the pain and agitate section. And also when you make the offer, we're showing them something that they want, right? Something rather than something that they feel like they need to buy out of scarcity, urgency, and fear, right? So the best part is that we have actually seen the results from like doing this kind of like non-salesy webinar stuff convert way fucking better, make way more money with it, right? And if you actually go and look at the people who like claim they're making a bunch of money with webinars like us or like some of the other webinar guys in the space, right? This is how they're doing it, right? They're booking calls, they're empowering the prospects, and they're not making it feel like a pitch fest, right? So how do we actually do this? Okay, let me give you an example of like some copy that you would actually change in the webinar to do this, right? So rather than spending so much time on what the audience is doing wrong, so we're telling you you're not getting enough leads, your ads aren't working, your funnel's broken, right? This is necessary, but we can get the same point across by framing it differently and removing the situation from the person, right? This is like what all the one-to-one sales guys do, but we want to do it in webinars, right? So for example, you're probably in a situation where you're putting out content, you're running ads, and you're maybe even getting some traction, but it's not converting the way that you thought it would, right? And that's not necessarily because you're doing something wrong. It's because insert mechanism isn't designed for the outcome that you want, right? So we're separating the person from the thing, and we're also adding a little bit of like a cushion in there saying like, it's not because you're doing something wrong. It's like, you just need to change what you're doing in this different situation. And then they think like, aha, I kind of get that, right? Because getting people to change is really hard, but putting them in a different situation is far easier, right? Which is what I say here. We're removing them from the situation because people find it really fucking hard to change, right? It's really hard to change who you are and the habits that you have, but it's far easier to take someone and put them in a different environment or a different situation or give them different tools to get them to change rather than having to go at them and trying to get them to change themselves, okay? So we're separating the person from the problem, right? Again, make the system and strategy that they are using right now the problem, not them the problem, right? So another example of someone who's absolutely fucking smashing it with this is Fazio, right? Fazio is an insane marketer, okay? So he's launched a new offer about doing AI-assisted agencies, right? So he's basically saying the agency owners aren't the problem, right? He's saying that AI is here and that if you're not fully leveraging it, then that's the problem. He's saying, cold email costs are going up. It's harder to book calls. Offers are getting more saturated, right? So he's saying all these things and profit margins are going down. They're not to do with the person. It's not to do, and the majority of the problems that they probably have are to do with the person, right? But he's positioning it in a way where we're not attacking them. We're simply just saying like, what you're doing here isn't working for you because of X, Y, Z. And if you were simply just to do this thing here, it would actually get you there far quicker, right? So we're giving them permission to be okay while still acknowledging that something needs to change. And then the last kind of like big step of this is to, we want to validate it's called presuppositions, right? So we want to validate the things that they are already thinking, because again, it's like if you were to go to a Trump supporter, right, and trying to get them to change their mind is completely fucking, they're not going to do it, right? Same with a Biden supporter or a liberal or whatever. I'm not political, right? But too many people, skip past this, and we need to actually acknowledge the emotions and experiences that they are having in order to gain their trust. So when we show them the offer, they know it's for them, okay? I know I'm going ham on this, right? But a great way that we've been doing this is by either telling your story or a client story. So in the traditional webinar pain sections, we're saying like, you're doing this and this is going wrong, right? But the way that I like to do it is by kind of sprinkling these pains and these problems and these objections into a story so it does the same job, but it's not as direct and kind of, we don't feel like we're attacking them, right? So for example, when I first started working with Ben, he thought he had tried everything and still nothing was working. And I get it, it's not a fun place to be. And he will tell you this himself. He was starting to think, maybe I'm just not built for this. But as soon as he came in, changed X, Y, and Z, it flipped overnight, and all of a sudden he was doing X, Y, and Z. So we have the person and the problem and the things that they are doing. But as soon as they just started making this simple little shift, everything changed, right? See how I cook there, right? We're not picking on them. We're kind of mirroring and showing them and validating that, because obviously if they're not getting results, then they know the thing that they're doing right now isn't working. So we're simply just kind of confirming that for them and saying, yeah, we know it's not working. You simply just need to do X, Y, and Z, right? And then the last thing, the kind of the biggest step of this, right, is that we're using the one-to-many call funnel, okay? We're putting the icing on the cake of this non-salesy webinar by, rather than pitching direct to cart, we are inviting them to apply to work with us and book a call, right? So no 997s, like in the old webinar model, we extend an invitation to the most qualified prospects and we allow them to put their hands up and say, yes, I want that. I want to work with you. And this is what we are calling internally at the agency anyway, the one-to-many to one approach, right? We present to many and we nurture to many, but then we leave the sales to the one-on-one on the call, right? So the main thing that this does for us is it allows us to preserve the trust and the goodwill that we've made. It makes the offer feel more exclusive. It's also a better offer rather than just some watered down course, right? And when you think about it, we're combining all the great things about a call funnel with all the great things about a webinar, and not trying to do them mutually exclusively, right? So one of the downsides of a webinar is that you could only, like the old webinar model really, is that you had to sell something direct to cart. The problem with the old, the kind of call funnel structure is that people don't really watch VSLs, right? If you go on your VSL retention rate, you know people aren't watching as much of your VSL as you would like them to. But when you look at webinars, the nurture rate is there, but we still want to sell the high ticket offer, so we do it over the call, right? And when you actually think about this, who would you rather have on a sales call, right? Even if you have sales reps, imagine for a moment that you're taking your own calls. Would you rather have someone who has watched 2 minutes of a VSL and just booked in a call and just like chatted shit on the application, or someone who has spent 90 minutes with you, seen all of your case studies, seen your story, had all their objections handled, and felt really understood and resonated with, right? And just to actually put this into context for you, our client Haroon went from doing just a call funnel, 7K a month, to 50K in a week from the first webinar that we did with him, because we pivoted from selling subpar offer, right, over calls to building him a proper high ticket offer and booking calls in for the webinar, because the offer is actually more attractive and we're extending an invitation to people, right? So you might be thinking, this sounds great, right? Like being nice and supportive, it sounds all woo-woo and fluffy, non-selly webinar, right? But doesn't this just mean I'll make less money? Do I not need to plug in some urgency and some scarcity to get people to buy? Is using pain to drive action not copywriting 101? No, not exactly, right? Here's the interesting thing. So with this unconditional positive regard thing, coupled with the one-to-many to one approach, we've seen way higher show rates, right, to calls than the normal VSL funnel. We've seen the engagement on the webinar, in the Q&A at the end especially, people aren't dropping in like horse seller, da-da-da-da-da. People are actually really engaging. They actually really want the offer. We're actually keeping a lot of goodwill with them, right? We've seen higher conversion rates and cash collected, right, from these webinars than the traditional webinar model or the traditional VSL call funnel, because people are way more nurtured. They've self-selected and put their hand up and said, yes, I want to apply. Yes, I want to book a call. Yes, I am qualified. And we've seen chargeback rates go down, right? Because we're not getting people in and getting them to book a call and getting them to pay, like by placing pressure on them. The calls from these one-to-many to one webinars are phenomenal, right? They're people that, like, you could even drop the closers percentage, closers, because most of the calls, you basically just order taking, right? This is what a lot of the closers on the offer say, right? And we have seen this play out across a lot of webinars now, right? The ones that convert best are not the ones with like the best copywriting, the most aggressive pitch, right? It's the ones where the audience actually feels most understood, and we pair that with calls and your best offer. which allows us to sell 8K, 10K offers to cold traffic on these new type of webinars. We're not doing super direct response webinars with an organic audience that completely burns them out, because if your audience is conditioned to join a webinar, get made to feel shit, get pitched, the chances of them signing up to more than one webinar is highly unlikely. But when we combine unconditional positive regard with booking calls, with fresh angles, the webinars almost feel like you're documenting something and like you actually have something to show them. Then they do sales mechanisms. But the beauty is that they are sales mechanisms. So you get the best of both worlds, right? So let's bring it all together. The traditional webinar model of going direct to car and fucking pitching the shit out of people, it feels salesy. They're designed to make people feel shit and then position the offer to fix them in the moment, right? The new way is that we're accepting people without judgment. We're booking calls. We're letting people self-select and put their hands up. We're selling higher ticket offers. We're getting better engagement, higher cash collected, lower refunds, and a way to do webinars that are actually sustainable rather than just every single week pitching the shit out of people. So that is how we booked 154 sales calls for 3 clients from 3 webinars. And if you're new around here, okay, and if you're ready, if you're an offer owner, coach, consultant, growth op, sales manager, copywriter, or a software business who wants help doing their first or their next webinar, wants us to do this done for you or done with you, you can book a strategy call below in the description with me and my team, where we actually build you a free custom one-to-many selling plan with a triple guarantee. Okay, you either love the plan, you implement it for yourself. If it works, let us know how you get on. You love the plan, you decide to become a client, either done for you or done with you, or you don't like it, you feel like your time was wasted, send you $100. It means you literally can't lose. Click here. No, don't click here. Click in the description to learn more. Love you lots. Subscribe to hear all the newsletter, and love you lots. See ya.